talents of helpfulness, encouragement, prayer, organisation, witnessing, preaching, all were used to the glory of God in Granville Road. I want to go back a little bit further than Granville Road just to put in the picture where I came into the Middlesbrough church. I met George at Newbold College, and in the holiday times I used to come and stay with him and his parents in Middlesbrough. We went out selling God's Way Out, church magazines. George was selling God's Good News, Bible Speaks. And the Middlesbrough members then were very poor. There were not very many. In fact, I think there were only 2 men in the church because it was almost impossible in those days to get Sabbath off. The people were mainly women, as I say, and they were very poor. Many of them had husbands who objected to the fact that they were Adventists and gave them a very bad time. But when they heard that my parents wouldn't have anything to do with me because I became an Adventist, they clubbed together and arranged to hire a Baptist church in Middlesbrough and arrange our wedding, and they did everything for us. They provided the food, everything, and we had a great time at the wedding. And afterwards, after the food, we had a grand social, just a very good social, and it made a very good wedding day for us. So that was my introduction to the kindness and the hospitality of the Middlesbrough members. The Middlesbrough people were moving from rented buildings to rented buildings. When I first came in contact with them, they were in the YMCA with all of the activities going on about them. Then there was a bomb site in Granville Road, just bricks and rubble. And Pastor Leonard Lane, who was our minister at that time, got in touch with the 2 ladies who owned the ground, and when they heard that we wanted to build a church on it, they were willing to give it at a reasonable cost. Talents, yes, we got some of the Newcastle members who were builders, the Handysides, and they came and built the church for us on Granville Road. Along the hall, and some of you won't know the Middlesbrough Granville Road Church, we had the church sanctuary, and behind that we had a hall. And all along one hall were big cupboards, and they were full of clothes, because in those days, right now, there was a lot of poverty in the centre of Middlesbrough. And whereas today we talked about having the food bank, then it was clothing. And we had those cupboards full of clothing, and the people in Middlesbrough could get chips from their doctors or from social workers, and they would come to the church and get clothes for themselves and for their children. That went on once a week for many years, for our Dorcas Society, as it was called, so that the ladies used their talents in that way. When there was the advent of cheap clothing from abroad, that need was no longer there, and the cupboards were removed, and we had a bigger hall to have our activities. We had many campaigns run by various ministers who came. We had them at Finnegan's Hall in Essen, Colby Newham. Then in the church itself, and from those campaigns we got very good members for the church. Brian's mum and dad came into the church, Larry and Di, Mrs. McGough, Mrs. Harrison. These names won't mean anything to most of you, but I can see some of the members who were in the Granville Road Church nodding their heads, remembering those very good members that we had. All the campaigns campaigns run by the pastors, but one of the Colby New ones, one of our pastors, Pastor Claudia, said, I want the laymen to do it. And he persuaded George and Derek and Charles Lamont to do the presentations there. It was from Colby New that we got Mrs. McGough. One of the campaigns was held in Billingham, and that was paid for and run entirely by the laymen of the church. In 1998, I believe we remember very well, we had the Net 98, when there was a satellite program held right through the country by Brett White Nelson, and we hired up all in Middlesbrough and George's School Hall in Stockton, and each week we would have the programs on via satellite onto the screen there. I mentioned that not just because of the campaigns that we had, but the fact that members turned out week after week after week, manning the desk, putting up the big screens that we had to have, putting out the chairs, doing all the work in the background needs doing. Because not just needed the talent of the speakers, but we needed the members to do all these other jobs as well. We couldn't have managed the campaigns without them using their talents. The children used their talents as well. We had Christmas productions, and I remember one year, particularly when we did one called Following the Star, and one of the Darlington members who came across for the Christmas production was so impressed with our children. She said, we have an old people's home, well, it was called an old people's home then, it was a care home today, in Herworth. Would your children come and do the production there? So our children used their talents witnessing to the people in the care home there. The children also went out with our church magazines. George got some cards done, and on it had where the children came from and why they were selling the magazines. And they went from door to door selling magazines like that, so the children were able to use their talents. There was a community, a local community near the church for all the people, all the residents in the area. And Jill and George used to go to the meetings, and they made friends with the people there. One of them was Barry Coppinger, who those of you who live in Middlesbrough know is now the Chief Police Commissioner for the area. I remember one day where one of the residents of the street came up to the church and said the husband had just died, and one of the members come along and say a prayer over the person who died. I remember Charles and George going along to pray. We gave out thousands of voice of prophecy cards. Alan Winship got one card through his door, put it in the bin. We did the same area again. He got the card through the door, put it in the bin. We did the same area again. And the third card, he thought, oh well, I might as well send away from the course. And he did. And he became So I don't know if you remember him coming with his carer some time ago, sitting on the front there. But he was the one who, as I said, cast the first two voice of prophecy cards in the bin, and then decided that perhaps he would. When we first went into Middlesbrough, we hadn't many children, but we still wanted them to do the Pathfinder work, and so we used to run that on the Saturday afternoon between 2 and 3 before the afternoon programme. Marion's nodding her head. I remember doing about dogs and trees and things. We went to Stewart Park, got permission from the park keeper to be able to take the leaves from the trees so that the youngsters could go home and press them ready for their tree honour. When when Pastor Edwards came, he ran an after-school club for the children in the church, and very ably assisted by Auntie Valerie and Auntie Pauline, week after week after week. He also ran a football club for the youth in the area. And believe me, it wasn't an easy job, because part of the trouble in Granville Road, part of the reason why we left Granville Road was the fact that we had so much aggro from the youth in the area. They would come in, ride down the island on their bikes during the service. They came in and snowballs at us. They came in, they poured paint all over the communion table, the organ. We had a lot of aggro, but he did his best for them. And then we got more children in the church, and Andrew and Rosemary used their talents to have a very good Pathfinder club. It was an excellent one. We had very good results from the ones that came along. Before, just I said everything chronological, before Andrew and Rosemary took over, and we had the few youngsters, they used to go down to Port Mulgrave with Pastor, yes, that's right, with their chisels and their hammers, hunting for fossils, bringing ammonite and all sorts of things back with them from Port Mulgrave. Another of our pastors was interested in photography, and we turned our bathroom at home into a dark room for them, and they learned to develop their own snaps, and we had them on a rope along the bathroom and hanging over to dry. Pastor Claudia was very good at DIY, and when we first went into Granville Road, the heating in the church, we always seem to have problems with heating in churches, didn't we? The heating in the church was overhead heating. There were sort of circular things in the ceiling, and the heat came down from the ceiling, dried our hair, it left our feet freezing cold. But Pastor Claudia put in radiators and the new central heating for us. George was very good at organising. You remember George as an old man and Derek as an old man. Believe you me, in the church they did an awful lot. He organised youth weekends, and they were famous throughout the whole country. We had young people even coming up from London because they heard how good the youth weekends were. The boys used to sleep in the church, and the girls slept in the members' houses. I remember distinctly having a crowd in our house, slept everywhere, and at 2 o'clock in the morning going down and saying, "If you don't want any sleep, I do." There's chatter all the time. So, yes, as I say, the boys slept in the church. Now that went on while George was the oldest young people's leader in the country. Is that right, Brian? That was Brian's comment. George was the oldest young people's leader in the country. But then Marie took over from him, and she ran it for a while, but we had aggro from the street again, and when the boys were sleeping in the church, they had aggro from the neighbourhood boys, climbing on the roof, knocking on the door, being a perfect nuisance. And then after that, Clara Smith took over at Whitton, and we used to have the youth weekends at Whitton they were. I hope I'm not taking too long. We had the men put on meals for the ladies, and the ladies put on meals for the men. I remember standing over George, because George was not a cook, saying, "I'm not going to make your contribution to the men's meal. You've got to do it yourself. Put this in, now do that, stir this, put that in," and made sure that he made his contributions to the other thing. Good. I think some of the men cheated a little bit. bought gatos at the shop, but on the whole the men did very well. But it was a posh do, with tablecloths, flowers, glasses. The waiter was digital and really made a thing of it. And the ladies did the same for the men. So we had many outings. We had cookery demonstrations. As I say, we went to Ormond Castle, Ace Golf Course, High Force, Eastbury Moor, Marks, Salford. And we joined with the Newcastle Church in hiring caravans at Braithwaite, and we went there and had a weekend together with our members from Durham, Darlington and Newcastle. We also took over the Scout campus at Carlton and had a weekend there too. We raised money for a church minibus so that the young people could get around. We had that for several years and then we sold it. Pastor Cole, they opened his house on Friday night for the young people, and Pastor Trevor Thomas invited the older young people. Rosemary and Andrew had their fireworks evenings. And although there was public witnessing, there was also private witnessing. Mrs. Lockie was a member of our church, a very frail elderly member, and Pauline was allocated to be her carer. And Mrs. Lockie witnessed to Pauline, and you know the result. Pauline is now a very active member in our church. Val walked into a fruit shop, witnessed to June, and June, although she can't come to church now because she's in the care seat, is still a member of our church. Marion witnessed to Marie, her friend, and Marie, now you know Marie, she's at Darlington Church now, but she wasn't a member of our Middlesbrough church. Not quite the same thing, but Ian Clutton went to Moldova as a volunteer, and when he was there, he was billeted with an Adventist family, and the girl in the family witnessed to him, lent him books, and when he came back, he walked through our church door, and he now working with the Standard Press. So, although it wasn't something that a Middlesbrough member was doing, I'm just pointing out how God uses different methods to influence people. Annalie was Colin. Colin came, Annalie was a member from before Colin came into the church.
Well, it was my children. It was my children. Yeah, I should just say that. My children were about 3 to 5 years old, and they said to Colin one night, "Don't you want to be in heaven?"
Yeah.
That made
so
me
use the children's talents, yes. Yes, so Derek, you remember Derek? He went out one day, he was a decorator, and it was pouring with rain, and he sheltered in a doorway, and sheltering in the same doorway was Colin Banks. Not Colin Banks, Gordon Banks. They were standing there for quite a while in the pouring rain, and there was a baker's shop, and name's gone again. Gordon said to Derek, "I'll just pop in and I'll get us a couple of pork pies so that we can eat them while we're standing in the rain." And no, that was Derek. Derek said to Gordon, "I'll pop in and get us a couple of pork pies." And Derek said, well, he didn't actually eat pork. And from there, it got on to a conversation, and Derek had studies from Gordon and then from one of our ministers, and he joined the church. So after just a chance meeting on a doorstep of a baker's shop in pouring rain, and God used that as a witness. So, I was talking to Dave before, and he said that he'd been convinced about the staff putting an advert in the paper. Anybody who will do anything about the Seventh-day Sabbath. God uses all sorts of ways. And as we sang in the song this morning about using our talents, that we're not all expected to be the best, only to use the talents we possess. And as we use those talents, as the talents were used in Granville Road, we got very many baptisms of people who came along to the campaigns, who were interested. We got people who came in, who went out of the church and then came back. We've got Margaret, we've got Norma who's being baptised next week. I mean, she found out about it when she was a small child and hasn't done anything about it. You'll have noticed the gentleman who sits on the back row slips in for the second service and slips out again afterwards with a beard. Colin was baptised many, many years ago. Hasn't had anything to do with the church for 30 odd years. We've kept in touch with him, and for the last few months he started to come back again. So God speaks to people's hearts, and we shouldn't despair if somebody doesn't show the interest that we feel that they should do. God is still speaking to them, and we can use our talents, not even just by keeping in touch, being friendly, and God can use that. So that's what I want to say.